Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Getting Started with Web Development, and this is probably going to be the last episode for a bit, just because I've pretty much covered most things you need to get started. But in this episode we're going to be, not episode, tutorial, we're going to be talking about how to manipulate the DOM with JavaScript. So let's just create this, manipulating DOM, and basically the DOM stands for the Document Object Model, which is basically just your HTML document. Like, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that's easy to understand like that. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to make this a little smaller just so I can move this over, and now what we can do is we can actually import JavaScript. So, well, not import JavaScript, but import our JavaScript file which we're going to make. So I'm going to go over to here and create a new JavaScript file called script.js, and then once we're here I'm actually going to reference that by creating a script tag and then using source and then just pointing it to the script.js file over there. And once we've done that, we can just go into here. This is actually going to run as soon as we get into this. So if I just console.log JS is running and then go to this, if we go to console you can see that it's just printed. So yeah, that's pretty good. And now we can actually manipulate the DOM. So first things I want to talk about are the actual how you select items. So let's say we had in our HTML we had some elements, like let's say we had an h1 tag, and let's just not put any tag in this. Now actually let's say created in HTML, and then we gave this an ID of something like text or h1 text. Okay, so what you can see is it appeared over there, and then if we wanted to manipulate this, then what we could do is we can go to JavaScript, we could grab the object, so const h1 text is equal to document dot get element by ID, and then we just specify the same ID we gave it over here, so I'm just going to put that in, and then once we get it we can actually just change its properties. So we can change the inner HTML or inner text. And basically the difference between this is in a HTML you can actually change the HTML. It's not too important for a h1 element, but if you're manipulating divs then it's really important. But it's actually quite unsecure, because if you allow users to input a username, then they can actually do something called cross-site scripting, where they inject their own JavaScript into it, and it's quite a security risk. So unless you actually need to use HTML, make sure you always use inner text. And then let's just set this to edited in JS or JavaScript. Okay, and now we should have got it, unless I'm doing something wrong. Let's see. So we have our h1 tag and we have an error, null is not an object. Oh yeah, so basically what's happening is it's going to run this JavaScript file before we've actually initialized this. So we want it to actually run the JavaScript file after it's initialized all of the elements. So there's actually two ways of doing it. What you can do is you can actually just refer to it there, and then you can see that's done it there, or you can leave it at the top and then add a defer tag to it, which is going to also do the same thing, basically just initialize it at the bottom. But yeah, now you can see we've edited that, and we can also select it by class name. So instead of ID, if we give it a class name, let's give it class text, and then let's just comment all of this out. But the thing about classes is that there can actually be multiple of the same elements, so that's why it's actually going to return a list. So if we just say const text elements equals document dot get elements by class name, and you can see there's name, there's tag name, but let's just use class name, and let me just get the same class name. So class name text, and then if we actually console.log this, you see it's actually going to give us a HTML collection, which is basically an array. But yeah, so we can actually just loop through this and apply it to all of them. So we can do for element of text elements element dot, then we can just set the inner HTML or inner text to let's just set this to grabbed with class, and you can see it's actually just set it to that. So yeah, next thing I want to move on to is we can actually just talk about query selectors, which are really similar to these, but let's just say we have a bunch of h1 tags just like this, and I'm just gonna close that, and you can see now they're like that. Query selectors are pretty similar to class, except let's just say we didn't have this, we didn't have the class. We can actually just grab it based on its like element type instead of just having a class. So if we save that, and then we can just grab all h1 elements, so const all h1 elements is equal to document dot get dot query selector. There's query selector all, or there's query selector. Basically, query selector is just going to select the first item, so let's just say h1 like that, and then we can just do all h1 elements. This is actually only going to be one, but you know, so we can just do that to inner text is equal to be what can I not type? First element, and I can see it only changes the first one, whereas if we do query selector all, then we actually have to loop through all of them. So for element of all h1 elements, element dot inner text is equal to edited all, and then you can see it edits all of them. Okay, so finally the next final thing I want to talk about is actually adding content in. So let's say we have a div, let's just call this our content div, so let's just give an ID of content, and there's nothing in it right now. Like, even if we inspect it, and then let's just bring this over, even if we inspect it and then go over here and hover over it, there's nothing there because there's no content inside of it. So what we can do is, first you can get it with get element by ID, and let's just call this, let's just get it with content content div, and then once we get this element, we can actually add items to it by either doing two things. So the simpler way, actually I'll show you the more difficult way first, and then I can show you the simpler way. So the more difficult way is, let's actually create an element. So const h1 text equals document dot create element, and then tag name h1 and element creation options. I think that's it, and then we can change this element. So let's set it to created inside JavaScript, and then let's actually, then we can actually append this to the div. So content div dot append or append chart, they're basically the same thing. It doesn't really matter which one you do, and then we can do append h1 text, and you can see we just added this inside where there's nothing inside in the HTML. So that's one way, and then the next easier way, I believe, is to just do content div dot inner HTML plus is equal to, and then you can actually just define it like this. You can actually use the these special speech marks to go over multiple lines, but inside of here I can basically just type whatever HTML I want. So if I want to do h2 and then created the easier way, I can just do this. And yeah, so you can also, with these special things, you can actually add variables in, like let's just say const message equals hello HTML, and then what you have to do is just replace this with a $sign brackets and then message, and you can see that actually added in there. So yeah, those are the basic ways of manipulating the DOM in JavaScript. I'm sure there's a lot more, but those were the basic ones which you're going to need. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in a future tutorial. Bye.